is the Leon Charney Report. And now, here is your host, Leon Charney.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report, and today we are going to discuss two very happy places, East Timor, the Middle East, and Russia. Can you think of anything better to do? I don't want you to get lugubrious because each person coming on today is going to give you something to lift you up. What we don't know yet, that's why you're here tuning in. We have Jonathan Paris from the Council of Foreign Relations, and we have Paul Klebnikov coming on, who's a newcomer to the show. He's a senior editor at Forbes magazine. He'll tell you about how safe Russia is. If you believe that, you believe that I'm Charlie Rose. And then we'll have Michael Tomasky come on and give us a lowdown on how Giuliani's doing versus Hillary Clinton, both unannounced candidates. A lot of money being schlepped around for two people who don't want to announce they're running for anything. Jonathan, welcome to the show. You had the distinct privilege yesterday of meeting the distinguished leader of the PLO, Mr. Yasser Arafat, the chairman.
Right.
So what do you think?
I thought he was in great shape. You know, he has Parkinson's disease. Right. He has the trembling.
You're talking health-wise, or?
Well, let me get into what he said. But
okay.
I thought he was in great shape physically. His mood was great. His mind was clear. He gave good answers. I cannot tell you what he said because you know how the rules of the council work. Everything's not for attribution.
Tell me how it works.
You're not allowed to repeat anything that anybody said in one of those meetings outside.
Right?
They're private.
Really?
You
sure Lester Gelb doesn't leak?
Well,
for a donation of $1 million?
I don't leak. But I will tell you this, that this guy really believes that where there's a will, there's a way, and he believes that Barak is like Rabin too. They had some good private meetings. He and Abu Mazen met separately, and they had some good private meetings, and they have developed what he calls a good climate for progress.
Well, the problem is that Barak is really not Rabin. And Barak, in my opinion, really differed from Rabin totally on policy. If you know, probably you do know, Barak was very much against the Oslo agreements. He didn't think they were put together well, but obviously he's stuck with it and he has to go forward. Rabin was a very honest and honorable man. Barak is a very focused guy. You know, the people of Israel are pretty happy with him now because when he decides that he's doing something, he has a long-term strategy, and he takes a couple of laps, hits in the middle. Mm-hmm. People are critical, but at the end, he gets his results. Now, what he has done is set up a timetable to have final negotiations, right, within a year.
Right. Two stages.
Right.
One is to have
February.
A framework agreement worked out by February.
Right.
And then 6 months later, by September, after the summer when you lose another 20 pounds, Leon, by the way, you look great.
Right. Thank you.
We will have peace.
You believe that?
No. But I think it's good to set an aggressive timetable.
Let me give you
I think it's good to set your goals high.
Let me give you a fearless forecast. By the way, I made a fearless forecast about Derry, who was head of the Shas party. I said that he was through. And I think Lally Weymouth was fighting me on it. Once a man is through in terms of being convicted, there's an opening that appears and someone fills that gap. So you don't come back. You can't come home. Thomas Wolfe.
So what's your forecast?
Barak, the most he'll get is 2 interim agreements because the issue of Jerusalem is nearly impossible to take back or to it's not taking back, it's to come to an agreement on. And the second issue is the right of return for all the Arab refugees. Right. Arafat must talk in terms of right of return. You tell that to any Jewish person who believes in the land of Israel, and it's impossible because basically you're destroying Israel. So they can't agree on that, and I don't believe they're going to agree on Jerusalem. It's very tough.
I think you're right.
So the most that you're going to get is a half-and-half deal, which is better than being at war and better than having terrorism. The relationship, I believe, between Barak and Arafat is probably a very good one. Barak's a very sincere, honest guy. We're going to do a show next week with Ruby Rivlin, who's going to come on, and he's a member of the Knesset for Likud. He's going to have a different opinion. Right. And but he backed Arik Sharon. But the irony there is Sharon is very close to Barak anyway, because it's the old boys network.
It's one thing you said earlier, and that is that Barak is not Sharon. Barak was opposed to Y2, to Oslo 2.
Oslo.
You know, Rabin started out
Opposed
to
Shimon Peres's baby.
Yeah, I mean, it was he changed, and so you can see change going on in Barak as he gets to know Arafat. You can sense change. The question I have is how the Jewish public is going to react, the Israeli and American Jewish public, to that change. Are they going to demonize him as another Rabin, or are they going to also change with him?
Good question. It's a frightful one, because any leader that moves forward on the peace process gets castigated by a portion of the Jewish community, not all of it, but a portion. I talk to people today and I say, everybody calls up and says, well, how do you think Barak's doing? I say, I think he's doing fine. Yeah. But don't you think, right away, don't you think, right?
He's giving away the store.
He's giving away the store, he's giving away the mountains, he's giving the prairies, he's giving away. I said, I don't think, because I'm not an Israeli, but let the Israelis think what they want to think. Right. But I don't know how you bridge that together. The people who in Israel who believe, in a sense like right-wingers, they believe that territory or land is far more important than peace. And the other part of Israel believes that peace is more important. There are many Israelis who don't care about Jerusalem if they can have peace. Right. Many. Right.
But they want troops on the Jordan River.
Right.
As a sort of like an early warning station.
Right. Well, you guys were doing this Casablanca conference where you brought all these Arab countries together with the Israelis.
Private sector.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was. And we did 3 others after that. One in Amman, one in Cairo, and then the last one in Doha, Qatar. And then it stopped.
But they were less successful. The first one was a big...
First one was
was a big one.
The biggest one in terms of impact. But they were all successful in their own ways. They were all different. But anyway, they stopped doing it when Netanyahu was in his second year. None of the Arab countries wanted to host it. And now there's talk about it, about resuming it, but we're not sure. We think it'll be in Cairo, and we think it'll be next year, but we have to wait.
I saw Barak on his visit here, and I asked a question of him. I said, Ayud, what do you mean by the United States should be a facilitator? And he gave me his answer that he really didn't want the United States to be an arbitrator, and he just wanted to help pull sides together, but he felt the two sides really had to make peace between them. What do you think the United States' role will be now that Bill Clinton is ex-Lewinsky and about 18 months to go?
I think, you talk to people like my fellow Clevelander, Aaron Miller, he's really optimistic right now.
Aaron Miller is about number 3 on the peace process out of the State Department. It's run by 3 people, basically. It's Ross, right? Miller.
Dennis Ross.
And there's another fellow.
Well, Martin Indyk is the head of the
3 Jewish boys.
The Middle East. Anyway, I think there's a lot of optimism. What the U.S. wants to do is be there to close a deal, be there to facilitate a deal, but not actually be the person making the trade-offs. The ideal is to have, as in any negotiation, to have the 2 parties concerned make some compromises. And, you mentioned final status issues. I fully agree with you that Jerusalem will not be solved. But maybe Arafat can give something on right of return for all the Palestinians, and maybe in return Barak might give him Abu Dis and let him call Abu Dis Jerusalem. Who knows? There are all sorts of trade-offs. And I think what you'll have is an incomplete agreement, but you'll have enough of an agreement to declare a Palestinian state before 2001. That's my prediction.
All right, Jonathan, but one of the big things that Barak did, and people don't understand this, what Barak did is he traded his domestic policy away by making the deal with the Shas religious party to have them come to go forward on the peace process. Right. See, he's taking a terrific risk because he's gambling with the economics of the country, he's gambling with the social policy and the educational policy of the country. There have been a lot of rifts between Shas and Meretz. Meretz is the left-wing party. Shas is the ultra-religious party, has 17 votes. Barak says, I don't care so much about that. I want to keep these guys together because the Shas party says that we can go forward on the peace process. So he's gambling on his domestic policy, which is very interesting.
He's gambling, and he's gambling that he's going to have a success with the Palestinians. And I think he will have a limited success there. Where I am concerned is Syria. I am concerned that the old man is losing. Physically, he's right. Getting old, and there are all sorts of power struggles going on over succession between his son and his brother and his brothers and nephews.
And he's a minority leader. He's a minority leader. He comes from a minority sect.
Within the minority, they're starting to have all sorts of skirmishes.
So you don't think there's a deal in the works?
Well, we're all waiting for Assad, and we've been waiting since, when was Madrid? 8 years ago.
Yeah. But we had Murphy on from your Council on Foreign Relations. He's probably one of the better experts on Syria, right?
He is.
He's optimistic a little bit, but you don't get too optimistic with Hafez al-Assad. I mean, he's a very, very clever, tricky guy. On the other hand, Barak has made a pledge to take his troops out, the Israeli troops out of Lebanon within a year. How do you get your troops out if you don't make a deal with Syria?
Well, you mentioned domestic versus foreign policy. Getting troops out of Lebanon is a domestic issue.
You're right.
So maybe that's where he can do something for the domestic public, even if it doesn't make sense in a foreign policy. Well, some sort of unilateral withdrawal. It's tricky, though, because otherwise they're going to come right up to Kiryat Shmona. I spent a summer in Kiryat Shmona.
Is that right?
In '68, and I remember the Phantom jets going over the border while I was picking cotton or apples. But it is awfully close, and I think that before they move the troops back, they have to have a deal with Lebanon, and Syria has to allow Lebanon to make that deal.
All right, we'll cut for a break, and we'll come back, and we'll talk about East Timor. Jonathan has written a book called The Politics of Post-Suharto, Indonesia, and he's an expert on East Timor. How he got there, we'll find out in 2 minutes, but not many people knew about East Timor about 5 weeks ago. If you remember, we had Arnold Cohen on, who wrote a book about the bishop of
Bella.
East Timor, Bishop Bella, and everybody sort of got excited about East Timor. Many people thought it was a rock group, so we'll be right back to tell you it was near Australia and Indonesia. We're back. I'm Leon Charney. We're speaking with Jonathan Paris, who is a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, expert on the Middle East and East Timor. I don't know how he got there. And then we bring on Paul Klebnikov from Forbes magazine, and then Michael Tomasky from New York magazine. So you're going to get a lot of information tonight, and hopefully you'll be illuminated. East Timor, how did you get involved with East Timor?
I had a fight with an advisor when I was writing my essay on Saudi-Israeli cooperation in 1975. I just wanted to get away from the Mideast, and I wanted to see how other ethnicities work. And so I ended up in Singapore as a lawyer for Kudair Brothers doing Indonesia work. And there I got to see how the Indonesian Chinese get along with the Malays. And I became fascinated with Indonesian politics. And it stayed with me. And so now, 19 years later, the rest of the world has discovered what I discovered back in 1980.
All right, give us a little history lesson in Timor. Timor was originally a Portuguese colony.
Right.
Why do they call it East Timor?
Because the western part is part of Indonesia. But for some reason, when the Dutch threw out the Portuguese in the 17th century, the Portuguese hung on to places like Goa in India, this place, and Macau near Hong Kong. It's a very odd selection of small places. And it's a very tiny area, 800,000 people. They speak Portuguese, they have Portuguese names, and they're Catholic. So although they look the same as Indonesians are predominantly Muslim. So there's a Muslim-Catholic issue here. But primarily, in 1975, the Portuguese had a revolution in their own country, and they just left Timor. They just said, okay, no more, we'll walk away. And they didn't do it in a good way. And the Indonesians took advantage of the fact that Kissinger and Ford were preoccupied with the Cold War and were with Vietnam being lost at the time. So they more or less, the U.S. government gave them a green light to invade East Timor. And for the last 25 years, the Indonesian army has spent trying to Indonesianize East Timor. And one lesson you learn in history, people, no matter how poor they are and how beaten up they are, they won't surrender their identity to a military takeover. So,
but who's really trying to take over that place? Is it the Indonesian army? Is it factual that's really? I mean, he made a big speech, the president, 2 weeks ago,
right,
where he relented in a sense and gave in to the UN. Was that real or was that phony?
That's real, but up till 1999, up till this year...
Were they massacring people there?
Well, first of all, let me answer your first question. They regarded East Timor as the 27th province of Indonesia. Does that sound familiar? Remember Saddam, the 19th province,
right,
being Kuwait?
Kuwait.
So they were humiliated when the East Timorese decided to vote. Almost 80% of them voted. We don't want you, and they said, wow, "You ungrateful, and we're gonna trash this place, and we're gonna punish you." And that's basically what happened. They just sought revenge because they felt that they had Indonesianized this place, and they didn't, and they just trashed the place. Yes, there are some massacres. They'll come out in the next few days.
They claim that 25% of the population was massacred?
I don't think that. I think that's way too high.
Really?
I think
who did the same thing, by the way, in Syria?
With the Hama.
He wiped out a whole town. Hafiz al-Assad wiped out a whole town when there was some revolution or brewing against him. It's amazing. These guys are massive killers.
I think the Indonesian army here, and by the way, hey, let's not demonize Indonesia. It's 220 million people all over the place. There are 13,000 islands, and there are many different kinds of ethnicities and languages within Indonesia. So you can't blame all of Indonesia for the way the army has behaved. But the army is very confused because Suharto was the dictator for 32 years. He was a general. He's out a year ago. They're making some kind of transition to democracy, and the army's trying to figure out what it's going to do. Well, its main job is to hold 13,000 islands together. And Timor had to go because it didn't fit in. But now they're worried that Aceh and Sumatra and all these other places you never heard of are also going to try to separate. Right. And that's the issue, why they wanted to make Timor a lesson to anybody else in this Indonesian empire who might think of succeeding.
How strong is the army in Indonesia?
It's not all that strong compared to our army. Or
very colorful uniform, a lot of medals there.
But, well, they are the strongest institution in Indonesia. Indonesia does not have a good rule of law. I know you're going to talk about Russia, but Indonesia is up there with Russia in terms of corruption because they don't have good legal system, they don't have a very good economic system, but they do have a good army.
So, what's his name? Habibie? Who took over for Suharto?
Habibie was Suharto's sort of assistant, lackey,
right.
A smart guy, and he hasn't done a bad job, but he lost the election in June 7th. They had an election. And people have to remember, so much on East Timor, but Indonesia had their first election in 50 years. Now, let's give them some credit. He lost, but they've got a funny election. They have an election first, and then they decide in Parliament who the real winner is. So there's a lot of jockeying going on.
Let me give you a surprise. Arnold Cohen, who was on here, wrote the book about Bishop Bella.
Right.
Said that the United States policy didn't give it two jelly rolls about East Timor because they were getting Indonesian money for campaigns. You buy that?
No, it's not the campaign. And I know what you mean. You're talking about the
not me, it's
96 campaign. I think what it's about is business. Indonesia was a major magnet for multinational and U.S. companies. Indonesia is an OPEC country. Indonesia is really open to American business, whereas Malaysia and some of the other former British colonies favor Britain and Europe. Indonesia likes Americans. I know because I was a lawyer there in the early 80s, and they liked me. But we basically represented Citibank and other clients who were in Jakarta who were making loans to businessmen, and they've been growing for an incredible rate. So it's been a business gold mine until 2 years ago.
By the way, an ancillary point, doesn't Israel have a pretty good relationship with the Indonesians?
Now you're talking, but there's only one expert on both Indonesia and Israel. I wrote an article.
That's why we're giving you all this time.
Well, thank you. I don't think we have too much time, but let me summarize the premise. Rabin and Suharto met 2 times.
Right.
2 weeks before Rabin's assassination, He met in the UN. You remember the UN meetings?
Right.
And then they might have done something, I think. But unfortunately, he's gone, and Indonesia, I think Israel is about 20th on their priority list. Timor, by the way, wasn't number 1 either. Timor was about 10.
But wasn't a lot of military exchanges between Israel and Indonesia?
Secret.
Shouldn't talk about it.
You can talk about it, but it isn't enough to have diplomatic relations. I was trying to figure out a way, what would it take for Indonesia to recognize Israel? Because I thought that the largest Muslim country in the world, there are more Muslims in Indonesia than all of the Middle East. A lot of people. And then 90% of it are Muslim. I thought that if they had diplomatic relations with Israel, Israel would feel more confident in their dealings with Syria and the others. And that just hasn't happened. It's been one of my disappointments, but it'll happen.
Last question, I'll let you go home. What should the United States policy be with East Timor?
We should support the UN peacekeeping force, which is basically an Australian-led with some Asian forces in there. We should support them in helping in this transition. Indonesia has given up on East Timor. It's now has no government, and they need a lot of help. They needed what the Palestinians got. They needed a 5-year autonomy period to build institutions. They did not. They opted for independence now, and so there's this vacuum, and the UN can fill it. I think the U.S. will be supportive, but I don't think we'll be the lead player.
The Australians are interested from a human rights viewpoint or a business viewpoint?
Human rights.
Hail to the Australians. Jonathan, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Leon.
Send my best to Mr. Arafat if you bump into him in the streets.
I will.
And stay tuned. Don't forget the book of my friend, Jonathan, The Politics of Post-Suharto Indonesia. He wrote it at the right time. Believe me, 7 years ago, no one would read this. Today it's in. And we'll come back with Paul Klebnikov, who's going to tell us how safe Russia is today. They exported all their money to the Bank of New York, so I don't know what they're living on, but he'll tell us. We'll be right back. I'm talking to Paul Klebnikov, who is Klebnikov, I believe. He was not. Are you Russian, Paul? Forbes magazine.
Of origin, yeah.
Of origin, really. I am too. Charney means black in Russian. In any case, he's the senior editor at Forbes magazine, has been following Russia, which is a huge story for the last 10 years. So let's open quickly. This whole fiasco about rubles or money, and they're not rubles, they're dollars, being fed to the Bank of New York. Whose money is it?
Well, look, you've had $150 billion, perhaps a lot more, perhaps a little bit less than that, come out of Russia in terms of flight capital in the past 6-7 years. Most of that is probably criminally derived. So in a certain sense, the authorities here in the United States and in Western Europe could take their pick, whichever account, whichever activity they wanted to uncover, they wanted to investigate. Now all of a sudden everybody is shocked that Russia's been exporting criminally derived profits.
So are you saying the banks winked and they just paid no attention to it?
Of course. I think what the money laundering statutes in the United States are actually very narrow. You have to. There are only about 6, I believe, criminal activities which would be classified as criminal activities worthy of having money laundered. Their profits come under the money laundering category. And there are things like drug trafficking, murder, kidnapping. They, for instance, don't include arms trading. They don't include bribery, fraud, extortion, prostitution, anything like that. So I think one of the reasons why this whole money laundering scandal started with the Bank of New York was because it was linked to a Russian gangster who was in fact involved with drug trafficking, among other things. And then also there's another version, which is that this particular account, the BenX account, came on the radar screens because there was a ransom paid from kidnapping, $300,000, that went through that account, and all of a sudden that gave them the excuse to open up the whole can of worms.
Do you think that the United States State Department knows that Yeltsin is leaking some money to these banks and they just they look the other way?
I mean, you'd have to probably not read any Russian newspapers or talk to anybody in Russia and probably close down your embassy if you wanted to stay ignorant of that kind of stuff.
So by inference, you're saying it's a good possibility. Or they weren't doing their job if they didn't know. They weren't reading. They were probably reading Joe Palooka magazines, right?
Well, we know from the analysts, from the intelligence analysts who used to present reports to Al Gore, in fact, who was sort of the administration's point man on Russia, that Gore deliberately did not want to hear about the bad stuff going on in the Yeltsin regime because it was not considered to be politically proper to sort of emphasize that. I think, which I think is a huge mistake.
So would you bet that the president of the Bank of New York will be there a year from now?
Oh, well, you know, for banks it's very difficult to weed out dirty money from clean money. You'd have to advocate. I mean, how can you advocate? It's really more of a governmental problem rather than an individual business problem. If you want to do business in Russia, you're going to be handling dirty money at this point. I think the real fault lies with the U.S. administration and, of course, quite beyond the U.S. administration, the real fault lies with the Russians. And the U.S. administration is at fault for encouraging the Russians, turning a blind eye to all this stuff, keep feeding the money into these corrupt hands in spite of all evidence.
We're American citizens. Russians default on their bonds. They check into the World Bank or they go to the IMF. They get refunded again. And meanwhile, Yeltsin is taking his money, or whoever it is. I don't know if it's Yeltsin, whoever it is, and bleeding the United States. So we're paying for all this.
But look, I mean, this has been going on for 6 or 7 years. Economists knew, very famous economists already knew that this was going on, that the amount of flight capital was exceeding any kind of IMF money coming in. So the dollars would come in, you'd have $4 or $5 billion would come into the country, and 15 would leave. So, I mean, it's stupid to keep, you've got a hole in the bucket and you keep filling it with
So
milk.
why were we doing it, the United States?
Well, nuclear weapons. A kind of misguided policy believing that, you know, if you feed a corrupt regime, it won't get more corrupt, it'll get cleaner, which is manifestly not the case. And if you feed them, then maybe they'll be nice about their foreign policy and so forth. But I think the policy has been an enormous failure. If you compare Russia today from the point of view of the United States and Russia when, let's say, 92, 93, when communism fell, is it more prosperous?
No.
Manifestly no. Is it more stable? Manifestly no. Is it friendlier to the West?
No.
No.
Is it more anti-Semitic? Yes.
Exactly. I mean, all the problems have been exacerbated. The one thing you can say is perhaps, yes, it is still fairly democratic, and you do have a fairly open press. But even that is under threat right now.
But if they don't like you, they kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, murders, you know, it's like Lepke days in the 20s, and they knock people off. Two huge journalists were knocked off in Russia. One was a TV journalist, a major TV journalist.
That's right, a big TV producer.
A big TV producer, and you've been following Russia for 10 years.
Yeah.
Describe Yeltsin to me.
I think Yeltsin is an ordinary Communist Party provincial boss who was quite charismatic. He's an enormous guy. He's got a great booming voice. He sort of stands up and projects himself like a kind of a dumb lion. So I think his charisma was quite infectious initially. He also had the correct instincts in terms of being friendly to the West and being pro-democratic and pro-market initially. But I think he's a man with tremendously low cognitive skills in terms of any kind of complex policy. He's a man of very low work capacity. This is even before he got sick. And I think he had an alcohol problem, especially in his first term.
You think?
I don't know. I never drank with him.
When I was in Russia for breakfast, I had stolichnaya.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean you have a problem.
And the lower people has Moskovskaya,
right,
which is the lower class.
Right. But I think, and in a way, you see in him the kind of psychology that you'd see in an alcoholic, which is profound periods of depression and activity interspersed with moments of manic activity and fury and
Is
sort
he
of
in
slamming
control,
the fist
though?
down.
Is he in control of the country?
Oh, no. No, he hasn't been in control since '96 when he really got sick.
Who controls the country?
Well, there's a narrow circle of courtiers. I mean, you'd have to go back to old monarchist kind of symbols and explanations here. There's a narrow circle of courtiers who include his daughters, his sons-in-law, a bunch of the officials who are close to him, and one or two of the big businessmen. Berezovsky, first of all. He's the sort of mastermind of the whole clique. And they are, of course, extremely worried at this point because they have to retain power. They will do anything to retain power because if they lose power in Russia, they are in prison. If they stay in Russia, they're in prison almost for sure because their crimes have been so egregious. If they try to leave Russia, they lose power and they leave Russia, they're going to be hunted people. They're not going to be able to travel freely because the Western governments and prosecutors are already looking into all their activities.
So
they're closing in on them.
They're prisoners in Russia and they have to sustain themselves.
They have to sustain themselves.
All right, I'm going to run through a couple items with you. Do they have a real tax revenue service over there, or everybody's cheating?
Everybody's cheating, yeah, of course.
So they can't collect taxes.
The taxes are done in a kind of extortionate way, you know, sort of the armed people break into your shop and they say, give us last year's taxes. We don't care how much it is. And you just have to give them.
Those are revenue collectors?
Yeah, heavily armed.
Really? Do their police and their KGB, is it working?
The police is filled with lots of very brave people who are trying to buck the system, but basically on the upper levels of the system, it's so thoroughly corrupt that if they ever catch anyone who's at all big, they get let go immediately.
KGB
is has gone freelance and is present in virtually all the segments of society today. A lot of that stems from KGB freelance policies, which started in the late 80s, starting from organized crime groups to banks to commercial companies to the current government officials.
Will Russia sell nuclear arms to Iran?
Not officially, but I don't think they have a good idea of, they haven't really counted them recently. How many?
They don't know what's going on. Big danger, the army is not being paid. Big danger there?
Of course, you've got, and the danger again is going freelance. You see, the danger is not some crazy guy in the Kremlin sort of waving his nuclear weapons around. The danger is the government authority is disintegrated to such an extent that people are taking their own measures to keep themselves fed and keep their men fed. So you've got already cases of missiles, nuclear-capable missiles, being shipped to Armenia, for instance, without the knowledge of the Ministry of Defense or the government in Moscow. $1 billion arms shipment. Well, Armenia, that worries the Turks perhaps next door, but it doesn't, if they can do that, then they can do all kinds of things.
So the United States policy is really to contain nuclear arms shipments, and therefore they tolerate guys like Yeltsin and gang? Is that it?
Well, they thought that they would get a friendly government that way. The problem is it's a very short-term policy, and it comes back and bites you in the back.
What should the policy be of the United States?
What should it be currently?
Right.
I think you have to try and help the Russian people.
How do you do that?
You have to show the Russian people again that you're friends of theirs, not of the corrupt people who are exploiting them.
How do you get money to them without facilitating through
you can do certain financial measures, for instance, which won't facilitate bribery and money laundering. You can, for instance, forgive the Soviet debt, which is a big drain on the Russian treasury officially. So if you want to help them financially, the financial system, you could do that. That doesn't bring any new money into Russia.
Why would we not do that?
It's a banking principle. You try never to let people off the hook if they haven't paid their debts.
The United States lets Israel off the hook all the time on long-term debt. Do you know that?
That I'm not familiar with.
Yes, they do. I can tell you. They wipe out the debt a lot.
Well, they probably postpone it. Well, there are ways of doing it. But then also humanitarian aid.
You're a doctor of what?
Of government.
Of government.
Actually, yeah.
Well, if you have a 10-year debt and you present value it, it comes from 100, it comes down to about 20.
Right.
So if you knocked off that debt, it's all bookkeeping in the end. So what you're saying is very important, Paul. You're saying if you did some real good bookkeeping here, you might be able to save Russia.
Well, you wouldn't save Russia, but you'd help them keep their currency stable. And I think if you're going to send any new stuff in there, you should send humanitarian aid. You have to send medical equipment. You know that their life expectancy has gone down by 7 years.
Terrible. It's awful.
It's amazing. And you have to help their orphanages, their this kind of thing. And you can't just keep subsidizing the guys in the Kremlin.
Tell me about Chechnya. What's going on? Who's bombing?
Okay, so Chechnya is the small mountain republic in the Caucasus. It fought a war of independence against Russia and won. They since then had popular elections that elected a president, but he hasn't been able to impose his authority over the warlords, who are Islamic fundamentalists. And the Islamic fundamentalists are now attacking the other neighboring Muslim republics, trying to set up an Islamic fundamentalist republic. And these guys have links with Osama bin Laden, for instance.
Oh boy.
And the Taliban, and so on and so forth. It's a sort of network that stretches through there. And the Russians are now in the thick of it, so they're getting their apartment houses blown up.
Well, after all this happiness, I'm going out to buy a lot of Russian bonds because I know they'll pay. And I got to bring you back. You got to keep updating us. Russia's a very, very important country in this world. Even though it's not a superpower today, it's still a superpower. And you can't be lackadaisical about it. It's really not a joke because they do have those nuclear weapons. I remember being in Ukraine with President Clinton, and the thing that they were really excited about in Ukraine is that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, which was a big thing. All right, we'll be back. Thank you, Paul. We'll be back with Michael Tomasky of New York Magazine, who's going to talk about Hillary and Rudy after this. Boy, this is like fun. We'll be right back. We're back. Michael Tomasky has been with us many times. He has been a defender of the rights of President Clinton to stay in office, because he thought Kenneth Starr should be exactly where he is right now, in oblivion, I think. Is he in oblivion, Michael?
Let's hope he's on his way.
Talking about levity, now we can laugh a little bit because we had two very tough but interesting segments. And now we'll talk a little bit about New York politics, where Michael is really an expert. The effect of Kenneth Starr, though, has really hurt Al Gore, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's one of many things that's hurt Al Gore, actually.
Why is he so downtrodden? What is it, his personality? He just can't get it going? What is it?
Yeah, I really do think it's mostly his personality. I mean, I think that there are, all this talk about Clinton fatigue, and I think it's true, but, if Al Gore were, an ebullient, charismatic, outgoing guy who were quick with a one-liner and who was really, in touch with himself, and that really came across, I don't think there'd be talk of Clinton fatigue. I think it's another thing to hang on him. I think Gore's problem is not Clinton; it's Gore.
I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
I had two commissioners in my office today talking about different things, and they're both commissioners for the city of New York. We had a big discussion about charismatic leaders. Mm-hmm. First of all, what's charisma? How do you explain charisma? Because we know that Al Gore has no charisma. Right. We're not sure that Bill Bradley has any charisma.
Right.
About George W. Bush, we don't know.
Right.
We know that Bill Clinton has terrific charisma. We knew that Ronald Reagan had charisma.
Right.
We know that the people running for mayor of New York today, I don't think any of them are going to get an A+ in charisma.
Agreed.
What is charisma?
It's a style. It's a looseness. It's a look in their eye of. It's a combination of sort of life and energy and realness, I think, and it comes out. It can manifest itself in different ways. Somebody who's quick with a one-liner, somebody who is who knows how to handle a tough question, who knows how to talk and in different ways in different kinds of situations. That's charisma, and it comes from a kind of a profound self-knowledge, I think.
Sounds like this show, doesn't it, Michael? So give me, aside from Clinton and Reagan, who would be great charismatic leaders? You can't call Pataki a charismatic leader.
No.
Would you call Giuliani a charismatic leader?
No, I wouldn't, although he has I wouldn't call him charismatic, but he has a kind of...
He makes a statement, then you know he's there. He makes a
statement, and you know he's there, and you know he means what he says. Like this thing that's just currently in the papers about the Brooklyn Museum, and he wants to defund it if they don't yank that show. other people you'd suspect that they were doing that because of an election coming up. But Giuliani, you just know he's doing that because that's what he thinks, you know. And that is kind of, I wouldn't quite call it charisma, but he does have a sort of authenticity about him that
Did Koch have charisma?
Yeah, Koch had a lot of charisma.
Yeah, I think
Koch had a lot of charisma. He had wit, you know. He had wit. He had style. He knew how to diffuse situations with you know, the mot juste and so on and so forth. And he was, it takes.
Does that help you get elected? Obviously, right?
Yeah, sure.
Did Mario Cuomo have charisma?
Yeah, Cuomo had a lot of charisma. He had a lot of self-confidence. He had a lot of, you know, he knew he had a lot of intellectual superiority too, I think, over most of the people around him, which you know, also hurt him in certain ways. But yeah, he had charisma too.
One of the issues that these people talked about, we did this morning, that you had really good people who maybe not that charismatic, but still they were okay as leaders, you know, and they made it to the top. Even Abe Beam, who's a great man, but you know, I don't think one-on-one he was, you know, getting crowds excited, but people loved him.
Right.
He was a very honorable man, and he made it. But out of this crop running for mayor today, there's no charismatic guy there, is there?
No, there's not much charisma there at all, I don't think. I think that Alan Hevesy, Mark Green, Peter Vallone, Freddie Ferrer. There are a few more names, you know. Those are the top ranked
Sharpton a charismatic leader?
Well, Sharpton has some charisma, yeah. He's got some, you know, obviously he's got some flaws that, you know, that counterbalance that. But yeah, he's got some charisma and some style. And he's one of these kind of guys that even if you don't like him and don't like his politics, he'll say things that'll make you laugh and that'll make you sort of nod your head and go, yeah, that's true, you know. And that's an ability to cut through the usual political, you know, fence of rhetoric and so forth.
Hillary Clinton,
and he's got
charisma?
She's not in the wit kind of sense. Certainly, she doesn't have much of a.
You know, it's amazing that what you say is concomitant with what these people said today. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
These were people who really care about Hillary Clinton and like her, wanted to be the senator.
Yeah.
But if you say to her, does Hillary have charisma? They say no, exactly like you. She's sort of, she draws it out. She may be highly intelligent, she may be focused, but she's nowhere near Bill Clinton.
No, she's not. She's actually kind of and I don't mean this as a big put down of her, but she's kind of a boring person, personally. I mean, she's got the charisma that travels with a first lady.
She's a step higher than Al Gore.
Yeah, she's got the charisma that travels with a first lady because she walks into a room and oh my God, there's the first lady of the United States, and it makes you do a little double take, even a reporter like myself. But as a speaker, she's not charismatic or flashy. No.
Well, you know, I know Jimmy Carter very well. You get Jimmy Carter in a small group, he was unbelievable.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Sure.
If you got him into a large group, his projection was not that great.
Right.
And a lot of elections, and that's why we're talking about it. It's so serious. If you're a charismatic person, you get 20 points before everybody else, no matter what your credibility is.
Yeah.
McCain can talk about his prisoner of war activities, and it probably were very tough and rough. But where's the charisma? Where does it come from? He's not going to overtake George W. Bush. There's no way. I don't even know if I don't know who George, you know who George Bush is? I don't know who he is.
No,
I think the problem that Bush is going to have is basically, if you know anything about alcoholics, people never recover. What you can do is try to work out a system that you can live and function. But chemical addiction is a very tough thing. And they haven't gotten to that yet. And I believe that they will. My friend Bill Bradley, he has no charisma. He should play basketball instead of talking, really.
Yeah.
He would do better, but he's a good guy.
Yeah. He's a good guy, and he's good in person, too.
Very good guy.
Very good in person.
Very good guy. But if you put him in front of a crowd, he's lost.
Yeah.
So So tell us about Hillary and Giuliani. Two people who are not running collected more money than the whole state of Timor has together with the West Bank of Jerusalem.
Right.
They have more money. They have more foreign reserve than the whole world, for Christ's sakes. And they're not running. They didn't announce. Can or will Hillary ever pull out?
No,
and not run?
I don't think she'll pull
out.
I think
Moynihan is endorsing Bill Bradley today or tomorrow,
This
right?
morning.
This
I was
morning.
there, yeah.
You were there.
Yeah.
Doesn't that throw a little curve at Hillary because she's for Gore?
Well, I don't know that it necessarily does. You know, voters don't think along those kind of party lines, I don't think.
Well, how valuable is an endorsement?
Well, a Moynihan endorsement of Bradley, I think, is valuable because he's pretty much the only New York politician who can raise eyebrows across the country. I mean, there are people in North Dakota who are going to notice that Moynihan endorsed Bill Bradley. That's
once in a while for his breakfast
something.
he also had Stolichnaya. You know that.
Pat.
Maybe Pat. Maybe a little scotch sometimes. You know.
I think he's on the white wine these days. Yeah.
But he is a solid statesman.
He's a
statesman.
He's great.
Statesman.
He's terrific.
So, what are the polls showing if they run Hillary versus Giuliani?
Oh, it's going to be a really close election. The polls now are irrelevant, but it's going to be a very close election.
Who is Mark Green praying for?
Yeah, good question. I think he'd find solace in either outcome.
Mark Green, if he gets in for 10 months, by the way, we got 30 seconds. Why did Randy Maestro change his position on the Charter Commission and say that we're not going to change the rules for taking over the mayorship from the public advocate? Why? You know why?
Because I think they were afraid it wouldn't pass, and it would have been really embarrassing to them. It's on the ballot this November. The charter changes,
but the change comes later.
But the change comes later.
Big
but they backed off of it because they knew it wouldn't pass, and they knew they were going to get hammered. And you have to give Mark Green and his staff credit for organizing like hundreds of people to come to all these meetings and scream at Randy Maestro and his people. They did a good job. They out-organized
All right,
them.
how much of a leap does he get if he becomes mayor? He's an incumbent for 10 months. Does that give him the shot, a real good shot?
Yeah, it gives him a big one. I mean, if nothing bad happens in those 10 months, then that's a huge advantage. If something really bad happens, then it ain't so good.
So when I saw Mark Green in the synagogue the other night wailing and crying, and then he's traveling to the Western Wall on a wailing wall,
Yeah.
that's real. He's praying. He's
You
praying
better believe
that
it, yeah.
Giuliani wins, right? So when he comes on this show and says to me he hopes Hillary wins because he's a good Democrat, he adds another, what I should call it, sin for the Day of Atonement, right? He's not telling
I
the
don't
truth.
know. You get into that with him.
All right. Michael, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been fun. After we talked about East Timor, the West Bank and the East Bank, Jerusalem, whether it's going to be given back, and the Russian mob, how they take control of the world, and whether they're shipping arms to Iran. It's good to kibitz a little bit about Mark Green. Mark, we wish you a lot of luck, and if you win, God bless you, and we wish everybody else luck. We'll see you next week.